Nazism, or National Socialism, emerged in Germany in the early 20th century, led by Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP. It was a far-right totalitarian ideology that rejected democracy, embraced extreme nationalism, and promoted Aryan racial superiority. The Nazis aimed to create a pure German society, free from Jews, Slavs, Romani people, and other groups they deemed inferior. Central to their belief was the idea that life was a constant struggle, often framed in military terms, and that society should function like an army. Nazism opposed Marxist concepts of class conflict, universal equality, and international cooperation. The ideology led to the systematic persecution and genocide of millions during the Holocaust. After World War II, Nazism was outlawed, though neo-Nazi groups continued to promote its ideals in some regions. Italian Fascism, developed by Giovanni Gentile and Benito Mussolini, took root in the aftermath of World War I, combining extreme nationalism, militarism, and the ambition to restore the glory of the Roman Empire. Mussolini's regime dismantled democratic institutions between 1925 and 1927, establishing a police state. Italian fascists rejected liberalism and socialism, viewing them as threats to national unity. Initially, the movement lacked racial policies, but it adopted anti-Semitic measures under pressure from Nazi Germany in the late 1930s. The regime also sought to suppress cultural and linguistic minorities, promoting a unified Italian identity. Mussolini's rule ended in 1945 with his death and the collapse of his regime. Hungarian Arrow Cross Movement. The Hungarian Arrow Cross Movement, led by Ferenc Szalasi, was a far-right, ultra-nationalist, and anti-Semitic party in Hungary during World War II. Inspired by Nazism, it promoted a racially pure society, targeting Jews, Roma, and other groups. The movement believed that Jews and Arabs were incompatible with European society. During its brief rule, the Arrow Cross Party deported thousands to concentration camps and oversaw the murder of civilians. After the war, its leaders were tried as war criminals, and the movement was outlawed. National Bolshevism. National Bolshevism was an unusual political movement that merged extreme nationalism with Bolshevik communism. It emerged in Germany after World War I, with groups such as the Communist Party of Germany seeking to unite nationalist and communist factions against the Treaty of Versailles. The movement combined anti-democratic, anti-capitalist, and anti-Western views, sharing some similarities with fascism while opposing Nazism. Variants of National Bolshevism also appeared in Russia, India, Belgium, and other countries, often attracting radical thinkers from across the political spectrum. Francoism. Francoism refers to the authoritarian rule of Francisco Franco, who became Spain's dictator after the Spanish Civil War in 1936. Franco consolidated power, ruling with absolute authority and claiming to answer only to God and history. His regime was characterized by strong authoritarianism, anti-communism, and national Catholicism, emphasizing conservative values. It suppressed regional identities and cultural diversity, promoting a unified Spanish identity based on Castilian traditions. While Franco sympathized with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy during World War II, his regime survived until his death in 1975, after which Spain transitioned to democracy. Argentine Nationalism. Argentine nationalism emerged in the early 20th century, advocating for a hierarchical society rooted in feudal economic systems. By the 1930s, it gained prominence, emphasizing order, hierarchy, and militant Catholicism. It opposed liberalism, leftism, feminism, and the influence of Freemasonry and foreigners. Influenced by Italian fascism and Nazism, Argentine nationalists sought to annex neighboring countries like Uruguay and Paraguay. The movement supported the establishment of an authoritarian state and was closely tied to the 1930 Argentine coup. Kahanism. Kahanism is a far-right, religious Zionist ideology founded by Rabbi Meir Kahane. It advocates for a Jewish theocratic state where non-Jews, especially Arabs, are excluded from voting and civil rights. Kahane viewed Arabs as enemies of Israel, promoting violent expansionism and extreme racism. His party, KAK, was banned in Israel and later classified as a terrorist organization by the United States. Kahanism is often described as a form of Jewish fascism due to its exclusionary and ultra-nationalist principles. Esoteric Fascism. Esoteric Fascism emerged after World War II, combining neo-Nazi ideology with mystical and occult beliefs. This movement reinterpreted Nazi ideas within a spiritual framework, emphasizing Aryan supremacy and the belief in a shared racial memory that connected Aryans to divine origins. Esoteric fascists often reference the mythical land of Hyperborea, considered the ancestral homeland of the Aryan race. This ideology continues to influence some neo-Nazi and far-right groups, particularly those focused on racial purity and mysticism. Austrian Fascism. Austrian Fascism, represented by the Fatherland Front, was a right-wing authoritarian movement established in 1933 by Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss. It aimed to preserve Austria's Catholic identity and resist both Nazism and Marxism. Modeled after Italian fascism, it rejected racial ideologies but implemented corporatist principles. The Fatherland Front persecuted political opponents, including socialists and Austrian Nazis. After Dollfuss was assassinated by Nazis in 1934, the movement declined, and Austria was annexed by Germany in 1938. Revisionist Maximalism. Revisionist Maximalism was a short-lived Zionist ideology led by Abba Ahimair. It called for pure Jewish nationalism and sought to integrate Palestine's population into Hebrew society through force. Influenced by Italian fascism, the Maximalists advocated for a Jewish state governed by totalitarian principles, elevating Zionist leaders to dictatorial status. Despite gaining some prominence in the early 1930s, the movement quickly lost support by 1933. Bandera's ideology, Ukrainian nationalism, Stepan Bandera, leader of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, promoted a far-right ideology rooted in ultra-nationalism, anti-Semitism, and the pursuit of ethnic purity. Bandera envisioned a one-party Ukrainian state without minorities. After organizing the assassination of a Polish official in 1934, he was imprisoned but later led a radical faction that declared a Ukrainian state in 1941, collaborating with Nazi Germany. After World War II, Bandera lived in West Germany until his assassination by the KGB in 1959. Hutu Power. Hutu Power is an ethnic supremacist ideology that asserts the dominance of the Hutu ethnic group over others, particularly the Tutsi and Twa. It gained prominence in Rwanda and Burundi and played a central role in the Rwandan genocide of 1994, during which hundreds of thousands of Tutsi were killed. Hutu extremists propagated this ideology through political parties and paramilitary militias, leading to immense destruction and suffering. Nazi Maoism. Nazi Maoism was a short-lived political movement in Italy in the late 1960s. It combined far-left and far-right principles, advocating Maoist guerrilla tactics and fascist principles. The movement sought to overthrow the government and establish a dictatorship of the working class. It dissolved in 1973 after its leading group, Struggle of the People, disbanded. Arab Fascism. Arab fascism emerged in the interwar period, blending Arab nationalism with elements of fascism. It was particularly influential in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Egypt, often opposing Turkish influence and receiving support from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. Its anti-Semitism intensified after the establishment of Israel, and Arab fascists were responsible for violent anti-Jewish actions, such as the Farhud pogrom in Baghdad in 1941. Brazilian Integralism. Brazilian Integralism, founded in 1932 by Plínio Salgado, was a political movement inspired by Italian fascism. While it sought to unite all races under a single national identity, it promoted anti-Semitism and nationalism. Integralists organized paramilitary demonstrations and opposed Marxism and liberalism. The movement eventually declined, but retains a small following in Brazil. National Anarchism. National Anarchism is a radical right-wing ideology that merges ethnic nationalism with anarchist principles. It advocates for racial separatism, promoting the idea of different ethnic or racial groups living in separate, self-managed communities. National anarchists seek to dismantle the nation-state and replace it with tribal communes that are ecologically sustainable, non-capitalist, and culturally traditional. Although its roots can be traced back to the 1920s, the modern national anarchist movement began in the late 1990s, spearheaded by British activist Troy Southgate. Despite its anarchist elements, it has faced criticism for promoting ethno-nationalist and exclusionary ideas. Chiangism. Chiangism refers to the political ideology of Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of China's nationalist party, Kuomintang, and later Taiwan. This right-wing authoritarian philosophy emphasized Chinese nationalism, anti-Americanism, and state-led capitalism. Rejecting individualism and liberal democracy, Chiang Kai-shek sought to unify China under centralized control while combating communism. Chiangism was also associated with the Blue Shirt Society, a paramilitary group inspired by European fascist movements. After the communist victory in mainland China, Chiang's influence declined, and his ideology waned further as Taiwan transitioned to democracy. Vichyism. Vichyism describes the political ideology of the Vichy regime in France under Marshal Philippe Pétain during World War II. The regime, which collaborated with Nazi Germany, emphasized traditional values xenophobia, and anti-parliamentarianism. Vichy France implemented state-sponsored anti-Semitism, persecuting Jews, Romani people, and other minorities. While it was called a national revolution, its policies were reactionary, seeking to undo the social changes brought about by the French Revolution. The regime mirrored many aspects of Nazi ideology, particularly in its racial policies, and fell with the Allied liberation of France in 1944. Ilminism. Ilminism was the political ideology of South Korea's first president, Syngman Rhee. It promoted ultra-nationalism and ethnic supremacy, emphasizing the homogeneity of the Korean people, similar to the Nazi concept of a master race. Ilminism aimed to create a unified, obedient population under Rhee's strong central leadership, drawing on themes of anti-communism and authoritarianism. Although rooted in the Korean independence movement during Japanese rule, the ideology fell out of favor after 1952 as South Korea transitioned toward more democratic governance. Hindutva. Hindutva is a political ideology that advocates Hindu nationalism and aims to establish Hindu cultural dominance in India. It was formulated by Vinayak Damodar Savarkar in 1922 and has significantly influenced groups like the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh (RSS) and the Bharatiya Janata Party (BJP). Hindutva promotes a homogenized Hindu identity, often opposing cultural pluralism and religious minorities. Inspired by European fascism, it has been described as a form of right-wing extremism due to its emphasis on majoritarianism and cultural hegemony. Ziaism. Ziaism refers to the political ideology of General Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq, who ruled Pakistan from 1978 to 1988. Zia sought to transform Pakistan into an Islamic state, implementing Sharia law and introducing strict punishments, such as amputations for theft and public floggings. His regime prioritized militarism and enforced religious conformity, marginalizing civilian institutions and suppressing freedom of expression. Religious minorities faced discrimination under his rule, which was marked by authoritarianism and the suppression of democratic movements. Sanusi Fascism. Sanusi Fascism was an Islamic version of fascism that sought to combine religious governance with totalitarian principles. It emerged within the Sanusi order, an Islamic movement in Libya, and promoted a fusion of religious laws with strong state control. While its influence was limited geographically and historically, it reflected the broader trend of adapting fascist ideologies to non-European contexts, blending them with local religious and cultural traditions. National Radicalism. National Radicalism was an ultra-nationalist, anti-Semitic ideology that emerged in pre-World War II Poland, exemplified by the National Radical Camp, ONR. Founded in 1934 by youth activists from the National Democracy Movement, the ONR rejected parliamentary democracy and advocated for a hierarchical national state. It sought to exclude minorities, particularly Jews, from Polish society. Although the ONR was officially banned, its influence persisted, and its ideas continue to resonate with some far-right groups in Poland today. Strasserism. Strasserism is a branch of Nazism named after the Strasser brothers, Gregor and Otto, who promoted a more radical, worker-based approach to Nazi ideology. Unlike Hitler's mainstream Nazism, Strasserism emphasized extreme nationalism, combined with economic anti-Semitism and anti-capitalist rhetoric. The Strassers envisioned a third position that rejected both communism and traditional capitalism. Otto Strasser left the Nazi Party in 1930 and formed the Black Front, a rival nationalist group. The movement was suppressed during Hitler's consolidation of power, and Gregor Strasser was assassinated in the Night of the Long Knives in 1934. Strasserism briefly resurfaced in the 1980s through far-right movements in the UK and France. Legionism. Legionism refers to the ideology of the Iron Guard, a Romanian fascist movement founded in 1927 by Corneliu Zelea Codreanu. It combined extreme nationalism, anti-communism, and anti-Semitism with Romanian Orthodox Christian mysticism. The Iron Guard promoted the idea of national purity and sought to create a Romania free from foreign influence. The movement briefly held power during World War II, but was suppressed by the Romanian army in 1941. In the 1990s, neo-legionist groups emerged in Romania, claiming to continue the Iron Guard's legacy. Ustaše Ideology. Ustaše Ideology was the political philosophy of the Ustaše movement, a Croatian fascist and ultra-nationalist organization active from 1929 to 1945. The Ustaše sought to establish an independent Croatian state, initially carrying out terrorist attacks against the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. During World War II, the movement aligned with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, becoming notorious for its genocidal policies against Serbs, Jews, and Roma. The Ustaše's reign of terror, marked by concentration camps and ethnic cleansing, made it one of the most brutal fascist movements of the 20th century.